The first thing that broke the white silence was the sound of glass. It went with a sharp, crystalline crack as a round punched through the armored side window of the lead truck and exploded out the other side in a spray of powdered frost and safety laminate. A second later, the sound arrived, flat, hard rifle fire bouncing off the cliffs on both sides of the narrow mountain pass. The convoy was already moving slow through the snow-choked road, tires biting into packed ice, engines grumbling against the grade. When the first burst hit, they didn't stop because of orders. They stopped because the world suddenly turned into a funnel of tracers and screaming metal. A machine gun on the right ridge opened up, its barrel invisible behind a jagged outcrop. Only the orange tongue at its muzzle and the red lines it stitched into the air, giving it away. On the left, higher up, another gun answered it, cutting across the first pattern, firing down and in, bracketing the 3 armored trucks and the scattered infantry escort like someone drawing a box made of bullets. A soldier hit the snow in front of the second truck as if pushed, his rifle spinning away, red blooming out under him, too bright against the white. Another dove behind a knee-high rock that suddenly looked very, very small. Rounds hammered into it, sending shards of stone and clumps of snow exploding around his helmet. The air filled with the flat crack of rifles, the deeper cough of machine guns, the distant thump of something heavier. Snow that had drifted onto the ledges above shook free in powdery avalanches, falling like ash. Contact, right. Contact left, someone yelled, but the words were swallowed in the overlapping roar. One of the trucks lurched as its driver jerked the wheel, already half-blind behind the spider-webbed windshield. The vehicle slewed sideways, front, and burying into a drift. Its wheels spun uselessly, throwing up fan-shaped bursts of snow. It stopped at a bad angle, blocking the path ahead, turning the whole road into a tight trap of steel and ice. Push past. Push. The platoon leader's voice came through the radio in Staff Sergeant Nadia Rook Khan's earpiece, sharp and controlled, with that edge it got when he was trying not to sound scared. The transmission cut off mid-word, strangled in a burst of static so fierce it felt like being slapped across the side of the head. Rook flinched even though she was already pressed flat against the inside of the second truck, shoulder jammed to the cold metal. Rifle up, eyes searching for anything she could shoot that wasn't just rock and flashing muzzle fire. Say again. The lieutenant's voice tried to push through her earpiece. Hammer one. Say again, say. Static. A rising shriek, then nothing. Dead. She glanced at the radio on her chest, as if looking at it would fix it. The signal indicator was solid, but the sound was gone. No calls to the battalion net. No link to air. No higher command. Long range is cooked. The signals officer shouted from the front of the truck. His voice didn't come through the radio. It came over his shoulder, raw and loud. He was half out of his seat, craning for a view through the cracked front glass. We're getting hammered by something big. You're kidding me, the platoon sergeant muttered from somewhere outside, voice barely audible over the gunfire. We're in relay country. There's a tower every ridge. Another gun started up, this one on the left, a harsh cyclical bark that sent a new stream of red tracers raking down. The rounds chewed along the side of the third truck, slicing through side panels, punching through armor where it had aged or been patched too many times. Inside, someone screamed. Rook forced herself to breathe. In, out, slow. The world outside the truck was white and red and black, where smoke from a burning vehicle already curled into the air. Sound came in waves, a heavy crump in the distance, then the hollow delay as it bounced back from the cliffs. Mortar, she thought. As if on cue, a round dropped into the snow 5 meters off the nose of the lead truck. For a fraction of a second it sat there, a dull black object half buried in the white. Then it went off. The explosion punched the air out of the pass. It wasn't cinematic. It was dirty and vicious, a sideways burst that ripped a fan of snow, ice, and rock up and out. The shock wave hit the side of the second truck like a giant, invisible hand, rocking it on its suspension. Shards of metal and stone pattered down on the roof. Rook saw a corporal, a kid with a crooked grin who had been joking about cold toes in the staging area an hour ago, spin backwards and vanish, swallowed in a cloud of kicked-up snow. When the blast cleared, he lay on his back, legs twisted in an impossible angle, the front of his plate carrier torn open, steam rising from his body in the frigid air. "Get him!" the sergeant yelled. Two soldiers broke cover from behind the third truck and sprinted, snow spraying from their boots. Rounds chased them, stitching neat parallel lines in the ground behind. One stumbled, but they reached the corporal, grabbed his vest, and dragged him by the shoulders back behind a smoking wheel well. Rook pushed her shoulder harder into the metal and angled her rifle toward the right ridge. She could see flashes there, muzzle bursts flickering behind slabs of rock. The enemy weren't firing blind. Their fire walked from truck to truck, from cover to cover, like they had targets pre-marked. "Kill box," she registered. They'd driven right into a perfect one. "Return fire." The lieutenant's voice came again, this time from outside, raw, unfiltered, no radio involved. "Find those guns. Move." Rook popped the rear door of the truck and dropped into knee-deep snow. It swallowed her up to mid-calf, cold stabbing through her boots. Bullets hit the ground around her with that sick, heavy thunk of metal into wet snow, throwing up little flares of white. She dove behind the shadow of the wheel, pressed into the tire's black rubber. Nearby, someone's breathing came fast and harsh, steamed air puffing from under a helmet. Two infantry troopers fired short, controlled bursts of shapes on the ridge. Their rounds went wide, sparking off rock. "Can anyone see that marksman?" the platoon sergeant shouted. "He's chewing us up from the left." A voice answered, strained. "Negative. I'm just seeing flashes. Where the hell is our overwatch? Where are the eyes?" "Net's dead," came another shout. "Nobody's talking to us up top." That hit in Rook's chest like a physical blow. Up top, the place she'd argued to be. The high ground, now spitting fire and steel down at her friends. She pushed the thought aside. Thoughts were distractions. Angles mattered. Wind mattered. Movement mattered. Another mortar came in, this one landing behind the third truck, throwing two soldiers off their feet. The air filled with a high-pitched ringing that made it feel like her skull was vibrating. For a moment, everything went slow, like the world was moving through syrup. Out there, beyond the wrecked lead truck, was the crate. It was just visible between the twisted metal and the black throat of a burn. Pelican-style, reinforced plastic, half buried in snow and debris. The intel crate. The one the signals team had secured in the truck's rear compartment before they'd left the base. Now it was out here exposed between them and the open slope. "Movement front," someone yelled. 10 figures emerged from the broken line of rocks ahead, spread in a shallow V. They moved with purpose, bounding from cover to cover, two up, two holding, weapons up. Not a desperate rush. A practiced advance. They were coming straight for the disabled lead truck and the crate. "Target that fire team," the lieutenant roared, pointing with his rifle. "Cut them down." A few scattered shots reached out from the convoy. They went wild, bouncing off the rocks around the advancing fighters. The enemy answered with flat bursts, forcing heads back down behind cover. For a second, the fire from the ridges seemed to hesitate. Not stop, just stutter, as if someone were adjusting, recalibrating. And then it happened. One of the advancing fighters snapped backwards like a puppet with its strings cut. He hit the snow, his rifle flying from his hands, a dark hole appearing high on his chest. There had been no warning, no trace. Just the impact. The others flinched, searching for the source. Another man turned to look, and his head jerked sideways in a spray of red, the back of his helmet exploding outward. He fell without even raising his hands. "Who the—" one of the infantry troopers near Rook started to say. A third enemy, dropping to one knee behind a boulder, never finished his movement. Something hit him square between the shoulder blades. He sprawled across the rock, sliding down it, leaving a streak. The fire team disintegrated in seconds. Those still standing threw themselves prone, pressing into the snow, suddenly very aware that moving in the open had turned suicidal. The advance toward the crate stalled. "What was that? Who's shooting?" a young voice near Rook blurted. She knew. Not who exactly, but what. The pattern was too clean. No spray, no arcs. Each shot picked a target mid-stride, mid-gesture, in that fragile moment between one piece of cover and the next. Someone, somewhere, with a long gun and a good vantage, had just decided the advance was over. "I don't have any friendlies in that sector," the platoon leader shouted, scanning the ridges through his optic. "Whoever that is, he's not on our net. Check the roster. Do we have a support team we didn't get told about?" "Negative," the signals officer yelled back, one hand clamped to his headset, as if squeezing it would squeeze sound back out of it. "I'm telling you, long range is jammed to hell. We're alone out here." "Then who the hell is?" A single distant crack rolled down from the heights. Just one. Not the rattling burst of a machine gun, not the chattering chorus of a line of rifles. One sound, clean and unmistakable, like a hand snapping a dry stick. On the far ridge, a figure who had been hidden behind a rocky lip, steadying a tripod-mounted weapon, jerked backwards and vanished from sight. Rook followed the angle with her eyes, tracing back from where the man had stood to where the shot had to have come from. She squinted, snow glare making her eyes water. At first she saw only white and shadow and rock. Then, just for a heartbeat, the sun caught on something. A glint, a brief, harsh flash of light off glass, far up and to the left, where the wind scoured a thin, narrow shelf into the mountainside. The light vanished almost as soon as she registered it. A small puff of displaced snow drifted into the air near the shelf, then settled. Silence swallowed the space where the shot had come from. Another second, and it was as if nothing had moved there at all. "Whoever you are," the platoon sergeant muttered under his breath, eyes still searching the ridge, "you better be on our side." The burning truck crackled. Smoke twisted into the sky, black against the white cliffs. Men and women yelled over one another, firing, dragging the wounded back, checking ammo, checking limbs. Tracers still slashed down from the ridges. Mortars still thumped. The kill box was still very much alive. But something had changed. Somewhere above them, unseen and unheard on any radio, someone had just stepped into the fight on their behalf. In that chaos, with the snow turning pink in too many places, the story could have started and ended there. A nameless guardian on a ridge, a few lucky shots, a unit that either lived long enough for help to arrive or didn't. Another ugly incident folded into after-action reports and buried under acronyms. But it didn't start here. It started hours earlier, when the engines were still idling in the base's motor pool and the snow in the mountains was just another line on a satellite imagery briefing. Before the crate was exposed, before the radios went silent, before one sniper decided that orders weren't enough. To understand how she ended up alone on that ridge, no orders, no cheers, no one even hearing her voice. You have to rewind, back to the first breath of that cold morning and the moment she knew something was wrong and couldn't prove it. The snow on the base's parade ground looked clean from a distance. Up close, it was scarred with tire tracks and boot prints, muddy in places where salt had melted it into slush. The air had that metallic bite that comes with deep winter, the kind that makes every breath feel like you're inhaling knives. In the motor pool, 3 armored trucks sat in a neat row, exhaust fogging behind them. Their engines rumbled at a low idle, a sound that mixed with the distant rotor thump from a helicopter coming in to refuel and the crack of someone slamming a steel door somewhere out of sight. Nadia Khan stood with one foot on the step of the middle truck, her rifle resting across her thighs. She was in that quiet pre-mission bubble where background noise slid away and details stepped forward. The way a strap hung, the feel of a bolt run forward, the weight of a magazine. Her gloves were off despite the cold. She worked bare-fingered, checking the tension on her sling, the smoothness of her bolt throw. Her fingers moved over the rifle like someone going through a familiar ritual, like rosary beads. She adjusted her scope, looking not through it at the moment, but at the adjustments themselves, the clicks precise under her fingertips. Around her, the platoon existed in a different atmosphere entirely. A couple of soldiers stamped their feet and slapped their arms, complaining about the cold, their breath pluming in the air. Someone cracked a joke about the mountains having a personal vendetta against vehicle batteries. Another asked if anyone had seen his spare socks. "Eyes front," the platoon leader called. "Let's get this done." They gathered near the hood of the lead truck where a tablet sat in a gloved hand, its screen flickering with a map. Lines and icons traced the route out from the base, up through the valley, to a small symbol on a hilltop. "This is a simple escort," the lieutenant said, tapping the tablet. "We're taking the signals team to the relay station here, pulling the sensitive gear and bringing everybody and everything back before the front moves in. Weather says heavy snow by late afternoon, maybe earlier. I don't want to be up there when visibility goes to zero and air support gets iffy." He glanced around the group to make sure he had their attention. He was good-looking in a tired way, dark circles under his eyes from too many hours in front of screens and not enough sleep. He'd been in country long enough to know better than to call anything routine, but he still used simple, as if saying it could make it true. "This is a daylight run," he went on. "We've got a narrow window. That means we're sticking to the schedule. No sightseeing, no unnecessary stops, no detours. We're in and out before anyone who doesn't like us decides to roll the dice." Rook's gaze slid from the tablet to the wall behind him, where a laminated topo map was pinned under strips of tape. It showed the valley in more detail, contour lines sketched like the rings of a tree. She'd studied it already, tracing possible overwatch points with her fingertip in the dim light of the intel tent an hour before sunrise. Now, as the lieutenant talked, her eyes kept drifting to one particular ridgeline that paralleled the road for several kilometers. It offered multiple vantage points down into the valley, little knife-edged shelves and knuckles of rock. Perfect for a marksman, perfect for somebody like her, and perfect for the enemy if they got there first. "When we hit the pass," the lieutenant continued, "we're moving through. No loitering. Our comms will be good, our route is known, and Hire has the schedule. Anyone dumb enough to try something will get smashed by air or artillery before they know what hit them." He didn't sound entirely convinced, but he said it anyway. Word was sometimes armor. "Staff Sergeant Khan," he said, nodding to her. "You'll be in truck 2 with your spotter. I want you mid-column, in case we need you to dismount fast, but I'm not planning on stopping." Rook shifted her weight. "Sir," she said. Her voice was steady, measured. "Recommendation: we put a small overwatch team on the high ridge on the south side of the valley before we roll. They can cover the pass and get eyes ahead of the convoy. We could move at the same time, just on parallel tracks." The lieutenant frowned. The tips of his ears were red from the cold. "You want to climb that in this weather before the front comes in?" he asked. "It'll slow us down, and we don't have the time." "We can make it," she said. "If we step off 15 minutes before the vehicles, we can get onto the lower shelf by the time the convoy enters the pass. It puts a rifle above the road instead of in the middle of it." He looked at the topo, then back at her. "We'd have to coordinate your movement with the trucks, make sure you're not wandering around on your own out there. It complicates the timeline." "It complicates there's more," she said. Someone behind her snorted softly. She didn't turn to see who. The lieutenant rubbed at his temple through his glove. You could almost see the calculations running in his head. Fuel, daylight, orders from Hire to get the relay gear out before the weather, his own awareness that the longer they were out, the more could go wrong. "We don't have confirmation of any recent enemy movement in that valley," he said, his tone moving toward the official. "Last drone scan was clean. Last week's," Rook said just as evenly. "Weather stripped some snow since then. There'll be new sight lines, new dead ground. Appreciate the input," he said, and he did sound like he meant it, at least on one level. "But we're not splitting the element today. You're in truck 2. If we need you out, you dismount. Until then, we move." "Understood." She held his gaze for half a heartbeat, felt the impulse to push once more, to say that Overwatch was their insurance policy, that being in the middle truck meant she'd see nothing until it was already on top of them. Then she swallowed it. "Understood, sir," she said. The briefing broke up. People drifted back toward the vehicles, chatter rising. The signals officer, a compact man with wire-rimmed glasses fogged at the edges, came over cradling a ruggedized tablet. "Can you believe we're finally ripping that antique relay down?" he said, half laughing. "That hilltop has eaten more of my budget than any enemy we've got out here." Rook slid her rifle back onto her shoulder. "What's wrong with it?" she asked. "Interference," he said, flipping the tablet around to show her. On the screen, A series of jagged lines scrolled across a graph, spikes in different colors. We thought it was just the weather or maybe metal content in the rock, but it's been getting worse. See this pattern? He pointed at a cluster of spikes grouped in a regular rhythm. That's not random, she asked. He shook his head. Not like anything we've seen before. Could be a glitch in the hardware. Could be some kind of environmental nonsense. Either way, Command decided it's easier to pull the whole thing, truck the sensitive modules back, and put in something newer and more modular in spring. Rook frowned at the pattern. The spikes weren't evenly spaced. They came in pairs, then a gap, then a long burst like static, then another gap. It reminded her of something she'd seen once in a training slide about jammers, deliberate pulses designed to test how different systems reacted. You ever see interference that regular from weather? She asked. He shrugged. I see interference. I blame the weather. It keeps my blood pressure down. The screen reflected faintly in her eyes. The pattern it showed didn't feel like nature's work. Thoughts? He asked. Maybe out of politeness. Maybe because he'd seen her looking at maps earlier and had pegged her as someone who cared about little details. Looks like someone is poking your relay with a stick, she said. Seeing how it squeals. He smirked. If someone's that interested in our old junk, they're welcome to it. Honestly, I'll sign it over. I'll even gift trap it. She didn't smile. Have you reported that pattern? She asked. Of course, he said. They logged it. Anomalous interference, cause undetermined. That's the language. It goes into the stack of things we'll care about if something explodes. She watched the lines crawl. Her stomach tightened a little the way it had on another mission years back when a small, weird detail had been brushed aside. A detail that had turned out to be the first domino in a sequence that ended with 6 people not coming home. Her fingers tightened on the tablet for a second before she handed it back to him. You mind sending me a screenshot of that? She asked. For my notes. He blinked, then nodded. Sure, I'll ping it to your mail. She thanked him and moved toward truck 2, the feeling of unease now a physical weight in her chest. The intel officer was near the rear compartment of the last vehicle, overseeing 2 soldiers who were securing a set of hard cases in place with straps and ratchet clamps. The cases were the color of wet sand, anonymous, with reinforced corners and heavy latches. These the drives? She asked, stopping just beyond them. The intel officer looked up. She was older than the lieutenant by at least 10 years, with more lines around her eyes and a haircut that didn't care about fashion. Some of them, she said. You need something? Just making sure we're not hauling spare socks, Rook said. The intel officer gave a small, humorless smile. I wish, she said. She tapped one of the cases. These are decrypted comms logs. Months of traffic between village reps, informants, patrol leaders, and us. Clean copies. We're cycling the hardware at the relay, and these are coming back for deep analysis and archival. And if they went missing? Rook asked. The intel officer's face stiffened. Then a lot of people who trusted us would have a very bad year, she said. Names, times, locations. You know the drill. Enemy gets their hands on that. They don't just get intel, they get a hit list. Rook looked at the straps, double-checking without really meaning to. I thought we usually move that kind of thing under quieter cover, she said. Normally, yes, the intel officer said. We don't normally have a storm bearing down and a decades-old relay coughing its guts out on us, either. Welcome to compromise country. Rook nodded once and moved away, her jaw set. Before she climbed into the truck, she paused, boots sinking into the edge of the parade ground snow, and looked toward the mountains. Out there, the ridgelines were a series of white teeth against the pale sky. The valley that led up to the relay hill was a faint notch between them, barely perceptible unless you knew where to look. She checked her watch. She checked the sky. She checked the ridgeline again. Then she dug into one of the side pouches on her ruck and pulled out 2 extra magazines, sliding them into a spot on her chest rig where she could reach them with either hand. She popped open her rifle case and pulled out the small backup sight she carried in foam cutout, mounting it at an offset angle on the rifle's rail. Her spotter, a lanky sergeant with a permanent half-smile, watched her from the truck's open door. Expecting trouble, he asked. Expecting glass to crack, she said. Or batteries to die. He tilted his head. Again, he asked. She didn't answer. The last time it had happened, On that mission she didn't talk about if she could help it. The optic had fogged at the wrong moment, the battery turning from full to dead in a blink. The first shot had gone wild, and by the time she transitioned to her iron sights, the opportunity where it would have mattered most had passed. 6 body bags later, people had called it an unfortunate cascade of technical failures and enemy luck. She'd called it her fault. She'd resolved that never again would a single point of failure stand between her and a shot that needed to be taken. She checked the backup sight twice, then once more for good measure. The convoy rolled out, tires crunching over old ice, engines humming. Rook sat by the small armored window of Truck 2, her rifle upright between her knees, her eyes not on her squad mates, but on the world outside. The road out from the base was a strip of brown and white, salt-scored, lined with wire and watchtowers. As they left the perimeter, it narrowed, the snow encroaching from either side. The sky was a flat, hard blue, the sun low enough that its light slanted across everything at a harsh angle, turning the snow into something that burned her retinas if she stared too long. Fields gave way to rocky slopes, trees sparse and stripped, their branches loaded with frost. Higher up, the wind had carved strange shapes into the drifts, smooth, wind-blown sculptures that rose and fell like frozen waves. On a bend in the road, she caught sight of an old avalanche scar, a long, dirty streak down one of the slopes where snow had once broken free and scoured a path through the rocks. She marked it mentally as both a potential danger and, in different circumstances, an opportunity. They passed a cluster of rocks where someone, locals probably, had built small cairns, little stacks of stones that looked like markers or offerings. Rook's eyes narrowed. She hadn't seen those on the drone images. They had weight to them, but not the weathering of structures that had been there for months. "Did you see those last week?" she asked her spotter. "See what?" he asked, craning his neck. "Those stone piles on the right," she said. "They look new." He shrugged. "Maybe someone got bored," he said. Winter art. When the convoy stopped a few kilometers later for a quick route check, one of the drivers thought he recognized a recent rock slide that might complicate things. The soldiers stepped down into the snow to stretch legs and answer nature's call. Rook stepped away from the truck, breathing the cold and deep. The air tasted like metal and exhaust. She walked toward the ditch where the snow lay unbroken and then stopped. There were tracks there. Not tire tracks. Boot prints. A line of them, coming down from the slope toward another cairn near the road. Someone had walked down, done something near the rock stack, then walked back up. The top layer of snow had been brushed over, but not enough to hide the compressed shapes beneath. She knelt, gloved hand hovering over one of the prints without touching. The edges were still defined. No wind-borne snow had softened them. Fresh. Her eyes followed the invisible path up the slope, but the angle cut her view off. Whoever it was had gone out of sight beyond a low rise. "Everything okay, Staff Sergeant?" the lieutenant called from near the hood of the lead truck. "Just stretching, sir," she said, standing. She took a mental snapshot. The angle of the footprints, the proximity to the cairn, the fact that no scout reports had mentioned recent friendly patrols in this exact stretch. Then she filed it away in the same part of her mind as the interference pattern, the ridgeline that would have made good overwatch, and the drives strapped down in the rear of the last truck. As they loaded up again, she ran her hand once more along the barrel of her rifle. She didn't have proof. She didn't have enough to stop the mission. All she had was a cold feeling between her shoulder blades that the landscape had been touched by hands that did not wish them well. The convoy rolled forward into the mountains. Hours later, when the pass tightened around them and the road lost its shoulders and began to feel more like a trench than a path, when the cliffs rose close enough that the radio's range to the outside world shrank and the light grew harsher, that feeling solidified into certainty. By then, it was too late to turn around. The first sign was the way the cliffs seemed to lean in toward the road, like stone walls closing. The valley, which had been broad enough to give them some sense of space, tightened into a corridor carved by ancient ice. Rook watched the walls from her window, eyes tracing the lines where snow met exposed rock. The ridges above them were jagged and close. Perfect firing positions. Dark mouths of depressions and shallow caves watched the road like eyes. "This is textbook," she murmured. Her spotter glanced at her. "Textbook what?" he asked. "Textbook mistake," she said. The lead truck slowed as the road narrowed. Snow drifts jutted into the path, forcing the driver to weave, hugging one side, then the other. The vehicle's weight made groaning sounds as it pushed against ice. The radio on Rook's chest crackled with local chatter. The lieutenant talking to the drivers, the platoon sergeant calling out sectors for people to watch, a nervous private asking whether the relay hill was visible yet. Rook kept her gaze on the ground ahead of the lead truck. The snow there looked undisturbed, a smooth sheet covering whatever lay beneath. Too smooth. She leaned forward. "Driver, watch your—" The row blossomed. From under the front left tire of the lead truck, snow erupted in a violent column. The vehicle snapped sideways, its front lifting, then slammed down hard at an angle. One wheel hung in the air on the edge of a sudden, dirty crater. The other was simply gone. The explosion wasn't enormous, but it was perfectly placed. The blast had sheared the front suspension, crippled the steering, and jammed the truck sideways. It groaned, metal complaining, and stopped, blocking the road like a dead animal. "Mine!" Someone screamed over open air, the radio carrying the word, even as static began to creep in around the edges of the transmission. Rook's teeth clenched. She had seen enough improvised explosives in her career, had watched enough vehicles die under her eyes. This one was no rush job. It had been buried precisely at the narrowest point of the pass, where the road had nowhere to go but forward or back. Behind the lead truck, the second and third vehicles slammed on their brakes, tires skidding on ice. The first shots came less than 2 seconds later. Machine guns opened up from above, from both sides, firing down into the trapped convoy. The sound crashed across the pass. Bullets sparked off the truck's armor, tore through softer metal, punched into the snow. The air filled with a sharp, instant hail of lead. "Contact! Contact!" the platoon sergeant bellowed. "Right and left. Get to cover." Rook was already moving, the muscle memory of a dozen drills and real fights kicking in. She grabbed her rifle, slammed the truck's door open, and dropped into the snow. Her boots slid on ice. She dug in, sprinting the few steps to the shadow of the wheel. She saw faces in the split seconds between movements. The driver of truck 2, eyes wide, slamming his hand on the horn in pure reflex as bullets chewed the air above his head. The signals officer ducking down, his tablet half on his lap, his headset askew. A private frozen for an instant in the open, looking up the cliff as if seeing the person shooting at him would make him safer. Then movement blurred into survival. Rook took a knee, pressed into the side of the truck, and peered out toward the right ridge. Muzzle flashes bloomed like tiny suns behind rocks. She saw the faint outline of a sandbag nest, a silhouette hunched over a belt-fed weapon. She raised her rifle, sighted, and fired. The shot went high, sparking against rock. She corrected, prepared to lead the target. Her radio erupted into a hash of white noise that made her flinch. The lieutenant's voice cut in, chopped and disjointed. "This is Hammer Actual. Taking, from multiple. Need link." Static swallowed him. It wasn't the normal fuzz of a weak signal. It was vicious, like someone had poured acid into the frequencies. "Long range just went to hell," the signals officer shouted. "We're being blanketed." "Ow," the lieutenant yelled back. "We've got line of—" "Sir, it's local," the signals officer said, his voice breaking. "They're not just blocking us from the relay, they're sitting on us. This is directed jamming." Overhead, the sky seemed to thicken. Rook knew it was just the echo of explosions, the way sound wrapped around stone, but it felt like the mountains were closing further. A mortar round landed behind the third truck, erupting in a column of snow and dirt. The blast knocked 2 soldiers off their feet, sending one sprawling onto the road, his weapon skidding away. Another round landed in front of the lead truck. The crater it carved overlapped with the mines, widening the hole, making the lead vehicle's position even more hopeless. Snow blasted across the pass, reducing visibility to a swirl of white and smoke. Rook heard a familiar voice curse beside her. Her spotter had slid down next to her, breathing hard, rifle clutched tight. "They're good," he said, half a laugh in his tone. The way there sometimes was when things got worse instead of better. "They're actually good. This is coordinated," Rook said, scanning. "Pre-sighted guns. Mortars walking in. Somebody's got eyes and ears on us." "Eyes I can believe," he said, ducking as a line of rounds chewed the air just above their heads. "Ears. We're supposed to be the ones with those." The lieutenant's voice tried again over the radio, sounding like it was coming from underwater. "All stations, smoke, suppressive, stay." Then nothing. Her earpiece hissed once and went dead. Short range, too, she realized. They weren't just cut off from higher. They were cut off from each other, their internal net shredded. The enemy wasn't just spraying noise into the air. They were strangling every conversation the unit tried to have. A private slid into cover beside her, eyes huge. "Can you hear anyone, Staff Sergeant?" he shouted over the din. Rook tapped the side of her headset. "Just ghosts," she said. "Great," he muttered, fumbling with his magazine. His hand shook. Another mortar fell, closer this time. The blast was deafening. Her ears rang. When the sound cleared, she became aware of another noise close by, a gasping, wet sound like someone trying to cough underwater. She turned. Her spotter was on the ground, half curled, one hand clutching his thigh. Dark red was spreading under his gloved fingers, staining the snow. "Damn," he managed, teeth gritted. "Guess they found me." Shrapnel from the last blast had torn a ragged groove up his leg. It missed the femoral by centimeters, but it was deep, and blood was pumping fast. Rook dropped to his side, dragging him tighter behind the wheel. The private shifted to give them room, firing in short bursts toward the ridge in an attempt to keep heads down. "Keep pressure," she said, her voice cutting through his ragged gasps. She ripped open a trauma kit, hands working with practice speed, even as rounds cracked around them. He tried to grin through the pain. "Thought I'd have the high ground today," he said. "You know, watch, point, make clever comments." "Save your clever for later," she said, cinching a tourniquet high above the wound. He hissed, his hand crushing hers for a brief second. This is bad, right?" he asked, trying to sound casual and missing. "I've seen worse," she lied. "You're going to be fine. Stay awake." She pressed down, feeling the pulse slow under the fabric. She glanced up, eyes scanning the valley. Snow and smoke swirled. Machine guns spat. People moved between trucks in brief, dangerous sprints. Somewhere up there, she thought, someone's watching us, plotting these impacts, adjusting fire based on what they see. She shut her eyes for half a second and listened. Not to the screaming or the gunfire, to the pattern of the mortars. They weren't random. They walked down the road, then up, bracketing where the trucks clustered. They shifted when a vehicle tried to move, when a group of soldiers made a dash, as if whoever was calling them could see those movements in real time. The jamming, the mortars, the pre-sighted machine guns. This wasn't an opportunistic hit. It was an operation. The signals officer, pressed behind an engine block a few meters ahead, looked toward her, his glasses smeared with soot and snow. "They're using us as a test bed," he shouted. "If they're jamming us this hard here, they know exactly where that relay is. They know what's on it, and they know what's in that truck." "The drives," Rook said. "Yeah," he said. "Those logs? If they blow the truck or drag it off, they don't just hurt us. They hurt everyone who ever trusted us," with a whisper. Rook's teeth clenched. She brought her rifle up and peered through the scope again. Beyond the chaos in the immediate foreground, beyond the flickers of muzzle flashes, farther up the valley, she saw something else. At first, it was just a shape that didn't fit, too angular to be rock, too deliberate to be fallen timber. Then the wind shifted, and she saw it more clearly between the trees. A camouflage truck or shelter, half draped in white netting, its tires buried to the rims in snowpacks. Antennas bristled from its roof like thin, black tree branches, pointing at the sky and at angles down valley. Cables ran from its side toward a covered pit where men moved between equipment. Even at this distance, she could make out the gesture of someone pointing toward the convoy and giving orders. The source of a noise in her ears. The source of their sudden isolation. A mobile jammer, command post, and control node, wrapped into one ugly package and parked exactly where it could hurt them most. The lieutenant, unseen but somewhere ahead, roared, "Hold your positions. Stay low. We're not moving until we get fire on that jammer." Rook looked at her spotter, breathing hard and gritting his teeth against the pain. She looked at the broken trucks, at the wounded. She thought of the ridgeline she'd argued for that morning, the one that would have given them altitude and eyes instead of making them the fish in a frozen barrel. She looked up the slope. The mountain face to their left was a steep mix of rock, ice, and deep snow. Going straight up would be suicide. But she saw a shallow fold in the terrain, a narrow channel between two outcroppings, half hidden. It wasn't safe, but it was possible. If she could climb it, if she could get onto a shelf above the valley floor, she could see more, hit more, maybe even touch those antennas. She squeezed her spotter's shoulder. "Stay with me," she said. "You're not done being annoying." He tried to chuckle and coughed instead. Where are you going?" he asked. "Change of scenery," she said. She keyed her radio out of reflex. This is Rook," she said. "I have eyes on a probable jammer uphill, north side, beyond the tree line. Request permission to maneuver upslope for overwatch." Her own voice came back at her in a shredded echo, broken by static. "RK this, hammer, negative stay." She winced and lowered her hand. She could imagine the lieutenant, pinned behind the lead truck, hearing every third syllable she spoke and trying to control a fight with half his tools ripped from his hands. She could also imagine something else, staying here, behind this wheel, guarding one small piece of the convoy's shadow while the larger battle played out above and ahead, with no one to shift its course. Orders said stay. Her training said stay. Her memory, the one she never talked about, said move. She remembered a different valley, a different directive to hold position, to wait for clearer instructions. She remembered the sound of enemy fire cresting over that ridge while she lay there, perfectly within the letter of the orders. Watching allies die beyond a bend she could have reached if she'd left 5 minutes earlier. Her fingers flexed on the rifle. "Staff Sergeant," the lieutenant's voice came, faint and distorted through the static. "You remain perimeter. Do not." The last word was shredded into a yowl of noise. The channel went dead again. Rook hesitated for only a heartbeat. No more than that. Then she cut her transmission, switched the radio to receive only, and stood. "Stay with him," she barked to the private next to her, nodding at her wounded spotter. "Keep his head down, keep that tourniquet tight. Pop smoke if you have to move." "Where are you?" "Up," she said, and that was all. She took a breath, rolled her shoulders once, and stepped out from the shadow of the wheel. The snow swallowed her boots as she ran, the cold biting at her ankles where it seeped in. Round snapped past, some close enough that she felt their shock waves tug at her clothing. The air smelled of burned propellant and hot metal, mixed with the unmistakable iron scent of blood. She aimed herself toward that shallow fold in the slope, the narrow gap between rocks that offered at least some concealment from the guns above. She didn't sprint blindly. She moved in short, precise bursts, using the limited cover the ground afforded, trusting her sense of angles to keep her out of the most obvious lines of fire. Behind her, someone shouted her name. A mortar round fell somewhere off to the right, its blast wave shoving at her back like a giant hand. She stumbled, arms windmilling, then caught herself and dove behind the low rise. She pressed against the icy ground, chest heaving, heart pounding in her ears. Above the valley's roar, the ridge loomed. White, steep, hostile. "You wanted the high ground," she murmured to herself. "Here it is." Then she started to climb.